Welcome, everybody, to the Brand Fortress HQ podcast. I'm your host, John Stojan. I've got my co-host, Matt Atkins and Mike Kaufman here today. And we have another Brand Builder episode. If you're an Amazon seller or a D2C brand, and you want to share your story on one of our Brand Builder episodes, you can apply at brandfortresshq.com/brand builder. Today, our guest is Deana Karim, the founder of Good Deeds. Deana, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So I'm excited to talk to you. I've seen a little bit, of the work that you've done, but I'm curious, just for folks that haven't heard your brand or you before, can you tell them a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got into e-commerce and how you got into your brand specifically?
Yeah, for sure. So I had my first son in 2012, and about 6 or 7 months after he was born, I was only 27, and I was like, I just didn't feel healthy, and I feel like I was too young to not feel that way. And I started cutting sugar out of my diet. I did very low carb Atkins-ish. And then I delved in and found keto. And I realized that I still missed having kind of like my treats. So I thought, let me make it myself. Because back then, this was 2013, no one had anything. So I started doing research. I'm a big researcher, and I just made them myself. And at 2014, my sister's like, I would just make them for people. I was like, what do you think? What do you think? And she made this very offhand comment. She goes, these are so good, you should sell them. And the joke in my family is don't tell me anything because I'll already have it done by like yesterday. So I go, okay. And she was like, okay. I did some research and I realized doing ready to eat was I'm a perfectionist when it comes to this. And I was agonizing, should I use grass-fed butter in the cookies or should I use coconut oil? And I was like, you know what? I want them to make the decision. And at that moment, I said, let me do a mix. So I did a chocolate chip cookie mix as my first one. I couldn't find anyone who would be my co-packer because they wanted such large runs. And I'm in New York, so I can't actually do it in my apartment. I found one that was willing to do it, but I had to change the recipe to sunflower seed flour, and it worked out because my son was 2 at the time, and I was able to let the other moms try it because it was nut free. So I took it then. I launched in 2015 of October. 2 months later, I launched on Amazon, which at the time felt very scary because you think Amazon is this is like this like such a big thing, and it kind of just took off from there. I reinvested in my company multiple times, and every time I put the money back in, I would just launch a new mix. And all the mixes are my formula, so it was very easy to kind of make new ones because I was making them myself, and I'd send it to my co-packer who I've now been with for almost 9 years.
Okay. And
What year did you say you launched on Amazon?
December 2015.
wow.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
so at that time, I mean, Amazon was not nearly as well known as it is today. What kind of inspired you to sell on Amazon in 2015?
Because I used it so much, I've always been, I mean, as a precursor, it was very hard to even connect to podcasts because I can't connect my headphones to my computer, but I can be tech savvy at times. I used it all the time. And before that, I was in digital marketing. So it felt like just something I wanted to try. It seemed overwhelming at first, but I was like, let me try it. Um, and I launched in October. So I launched it there in December, which is when I found out I was pregnant with my second son. And I was still working at my job. I was still doing digital marketing as a project manager. And during this time, I would just use the money I made to funnel into the company. I had no one giving me anything. And at that time, I was working on a brownie mix. And in May, a couple months before my due date, they let me go. And so I was like, oh my God. So I was like, well, I have this brownie mix. Let me just put the last amount of like money I made, put into this mix. I went in August 2nd to do my C-section. August 3rd, I was in the hospital, and my husband's like, oh, well, here's your phone. And I looked, and the brownie mix had hit #1 for brownie mixes on Amazon. And I was like, ah, and he goes, you just had surgery, like relax, like calm down. Because the plan was after I had my second that I would try to find another marketing job just to fund Good Deeds until I could keep it going. But at that point, he looked at me, he goes, I will help you. Because New York's expensive. He goes, I will help you, but let's give it this is your moment. Give it everything you have. And then I never looked back from there. So that was August 2016, and it grew from there. So it was really very exciting. When you see like #1, like
Yeah.
bestseller for Amazon, there's like no feeling like it. I have to be honest.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So I do have a question, based on the notes that you said here, and you kind of mentioned it a little bit there, which was starting with, I think you mentioned like around $5,000,
Mhm.
which, all three of us have, either have our own brands or have run our own brands before, especially when you're talking about e-commerce. $5,000 doesn't go a long ways, whether it's launch and then even, it's almost harder ones if you're successful in order to buy inventory and all that type of stuff. So I'm just curious,
Yeah.
what sort of challenges did you face kind of in those early days as growing your business when it came to the capital portion of it?
I just bootstrapped a lot. I didn't pay myself in my company, so I started in 2015. I didn't pay myself for almost over 2 years. I'd say 2.5 years, because I
Yeah.
was just like so focused on this. And I think that, but again, I'm lucky. Like I have to, in the sense that no, I didn't get financing and no one was investing, but I had a supportive partner, my husband, that and I had the two kids and all. Don't get me wrong, it was very hard having two kids in New York City. Putting the, I for about 2 years, I was the one doing all the fulfillment as well, and sending the boxes to Amazon, which was you know apartment buildings do not like it when you have pallets coming in. I'll tell you right now, they are not happy about it. I had some people in the building who were complaining, and I was like, oh my God. But that's what really, I was able to keep my costs down so low because fulfillment is so expensive.
Yeah.
So what I would do is I would pack everything. My son would, like, he was a newborn, he was a baby. So I would like breastfeed him while I'm printing out the labels and he's asleep, and I would pack everything. I'd put it under the stroller, drop it off at the mail, and then go pick up my 4-year old at the time. And I think that's really how I was able to do it. Not everyone has that luxury, but I also did have a cushion. I saved as much as I could when I was working because my digital marketing job was good. But I was a contractor for them, so I had no like package or anything. It was like, okay, see you later. Because
Hmm.
everyone's like, oh, but you were pregnant. Did you get? I was like, it doesn't matter. When you're a contractor, maybe you get paid really well per hour, but you get nothing if they let you go.
Yeah.
So it was just kind of like, what do I do with this? Um, So it was hard, but I think the biggest takeaway from it was I was able to learn how to do everything, and I realized what I was good at. So I kept those, and what I wasn't good at is what I learned eventually to outsource. Because in the beginning you're very controlling, because it's like
Yeah.
it was my third kid. I was like, no one knows how to do this like me. I
Right.
think I didn't let anyone help me with my Instagram for almost 5 years, and then my grandma passed away, God rest her soul, and I needed the person I at the time had hired to help me, a contractor. And I very begrudgingly gave her the login. I was like, if anything doesn't look good, this is gonna be a problem. So, because I was like this, all this before iOS changes. I don't want to get into that, but yeah. So I went off on a tangent, but that's how I did it.
So
Yeah, that's great.
I
Well,
have
and I
a
think,
question, Deana. So today, I mean, we
Mhm.
all know this as Amazon sellers, like in the current state, running into low inventory or stockouts is obviously a really huge deal. Um, Back in the day, though, I started on Amazon in 2014, so I know that space and how it's changed since then till now. But back then it wasn't as huge. Fortunately, I'm curious what your experience was in the category that you're in. Um, how regularly did you experience stockouts because of cash flow or whatever the reasons might have been?
Mm.
And how did that affect you in terms of, say, rankings and things like that, as compared to how it would affect you now? I'm just
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So back then, because I was just like, it was such, and I know you'll agree, it's such a learning curve when you're doing this. Because at first you're like, this is great, I'm making sales, and you just don't know how to gauge. And again, buyers are also super fickle. So like, I'll have amazing months, and then the next month, I'm like, am I gonna go out of business? Like, I'm so confused. Do you not like me anymore? It's like a lot. Back then, it really was. I was just winging it as I was going on. And whenever I had to buy, sometimes I would then have to just take from my savings because I initiated with the 5,000, and then I would sometimes just have to take from my savings just to keep it going. But I
yeah.
got lucky that because I didn't touch my money for any reason, I was able to just keep using the money that was coming in to buy the new stocks. Now, the issue is back then when we would send inventory, it would get there fairly quickly and check in fairly quickly. Now it's taken sometimes up to 6 weeks, and it can be literally in the same state and from where I'm shipping it from.
Yeah.
So it makes me super anxious. So now, um, and again, I also launched a bakeware line to kind of complement the mixes and the sprinkles and the frosting and everything. And that's added a whole new level of stock outs because I'm now shipping it from overseas, and that's a whole new ball game. And you have Amazon Global Logistics, which is its own kind of thing. So I'm still learning. It has hurt me because one of my products, I have a brownie pan with dividers, and it does very well. And I love it. It's a great product. But it stocked out, and then it finally came in. It was there, just it wasn't checked in. And when that happened, the BSR went down. And not only that, because with ads, I was looking at it, I was like, why is my ACOS so high? I didn't even have stock for 2-3 weeks.
Right.
And you don't want to turn anything off, right? Because then it's a nightmare. So you pay for it. And I think that's the biggest thing that I'm learning. And I know we're all getting those emails now about, you need to make sure you don't have low inventory levels, like very, very stressful. Back then, I remember the trick was just kind of closing a listing if you didn't have it. That's
Yeah.
not really what's happening anymore. But that was a
Right.
fun trick for a while. We enjoyed it. But right now it's just me now having to put in more money to make sure that I have so much stock just in case. Especially because some of my items can be very seasonal. So it's like here's the problem with Amazon. You either have too much and then you pay storage and you don't want to do that, or you have too little and now you're going to get penalized. So it's a very weird spot to be in right now. What I've done recently, and I think this is what's helping, is that I have a separate warehouse for my inventory because I also sell direct to consumer on my website. I
Yep.
think because I have that, I'm in a good spot that if I ever need to send something, I can send something. If
Right.
I need to send anything back, then we're good. But if I'm ordering things from overseas, I don't have that. So it's now learning it all over again. But it's a nightmare. I'm not gonna lie to you. I really hate it. So,
Well, and I'm curious because I feel like you have an extra dimension in there. One of the brands I used to have was in the CPG category, and when you're talking about food and beverage products, you also have an expiration date on it that you don't have with other products. And so I know the challenge that we ran into, and I'm curious if you have the same issues, is that it seems that Amazon has not discovered first in, first out, or at least how to
I
execute it
know,
well.
I
And so that
know.
was a huge frustration.
I hate it. What I was able to do, because this was a problem, and you lose money. Like I'm losing
Right.
all of them. Like you could have sold it. Like it was there. I would get messages like you have expired inventory. I was like, that's impossible. I was low inventory. I sent new inventory. Why didn't you use it? What I did is I went and I lengthened my shelf life. So meaning that I went and you can do testing and like food testing and stuff to be able
Mhm.
to lengthen it, and that's what helped me. Because before that, my shelf life was only a year, and it was very very like so stressful. Now we're at 18 months, and it gives me that cushion, especially. And then I've learned with my slower sellers where they sell, but not as much as like my top five. I really do let them get kind of low, and I don't send anything new until I'm like, I really have to. And I'm usually sending it from my warehouse, so I know what the shelf life is. And then I try not to send newly made items, meaning like ones with different expiration dates, because I think that's where the problem was happening. Like I would have 300 units left, and then I'm sending another 5,000. Um, and then they forgot about those 300. I'm like, they still count. Like they're still good. And a year
Yeah.
later, it's like, we're gonna have to remove these. They're destroyed. They're this, they're that. I'm like, oh my God, just take it. I don't even care at this point. But lengthening my shelf life. It is very nice though, having now like kind of bakeware items, pans and stuff where I don't have to worry about that. That's been nice. But
Can you dig in, Deana, so I don't sell food items and certainly not consumable food items. So this is it's a new area for me. For other sellers who are in that category listening to the podcast, what is that process? What does that process look like to get that extended in case they don't know that it's even possible or maybe don't know how to do it. I could see how it would be very useful. What was that process like?
Oh, so there's like there are food labs and you can send them and you send them all the ingredients that are used. You'd have to work with your co-packer. I guess because the items that I sell, they're not white labeled. Like they're my intellectual property. They're my formulas. So I work
Sure.
very closely with my co-packer. So it's a little bit different in that sense. But if someone was working with maybe like a white label food company and they're putting their name on it, they always, those companies that have, they've reached out to me before because I was so curious about it. I didn't use it because I thought my mixes were better. My formulas were better, but I digress. They have internal labs in those, and they will do it for a cost, but they will do it. And so it's basically just called shelf life extension, and it's almost like an experiment. And then they can tell you, and then what they do is they'll go based on the ingredients. So some ingredients obviously will become rancid faster. And you have
Sure.
to be careful. A couple of my mixes have coconut flour, which is fine. But when I was shipping to like the Caribbean, the bags would inflate with the coconut because of the humidity. So it's just, I implore people who have food items, if they didn't make them themselves, like they didn't actually create it and know, because I know how every ingredient works, I implore them to actually research how it does because it will save you a lot of money in the long run. Because I've seen people, especially competitors that I know are, some of them have like very, very closely copied me. Um, and then they'll have issues. Maybe something leaks, maybe this, that. You have to know what you're trying because there's just like every ingredient is so different. If you just trust, it's kind of like what I said in the beginning when I first started. You want to know how to do everything. You don't have to do it well. Just know how to do everything so that you know which questions to ask. I think that's the biggest thing.
Hmm. And so it
Super clear.
sounds like for
Hey,
food items.
Dina.
So sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Dina, one of the things that you mentioned was outsourcing. We've talked about a lot of that. We actually had a full episode on what it was like to start outsourcing. The other thing that I saw was the difficulty that you had in outsourcing. And that was part of the discussion that we've had. We all had a hard time letting go of certain things in our business. What kind of walk me through what were the first things that you just decided to outsource in your business, and did that change kind of over time? You realized that maybe you outsource something that you didn't want to outsource that you do internally now. What did outsourcing look like for you?
Yeah. In the beginning, it was customer service because I just, I mean, I love my customers and I became friends with so many of them. I keep in touch. Some of them send me like holiday cards. I mean, like it's really nice. So I'm very close to my community. But I needed to give that one away because it was just, that's when things started to pick up and I had 2 kids under 4 and I was just like, I can't. I did that. And then I outsourced eventually fulfillment, to like actually having the fulfillment center. And that was the biggest blessing, and curse because from then I had to figure out, I'm now on my like 6th fulfillment center. It's just, it's, and right? Like they give you something and then you get there and they're like, well, there's this fee and this fee and this fee and this fee.
Right.
And then, you try to work around it. Like there's the time where putting on the ASIN labels for Amazon, Amazon was only charging 30 cents. And I was like, okay, so what's more, like I would just do kind of a cost, like, okay, should I just let the warehouse do it? Should I send it from the co-packer? Like, let me figure this out. Then they increased it to, it was, I think, January of 2023, to 55 cents an item. And I was like, that's a huge chunk. Like when I'm selling something for $14 and you're taking 55 cents and it hasn't even landed yet. That's
Right.
why I was like, no, no, no. So I need to move. And I think the biggest advice for fulfillment centers is finding someone who does know how to do Amazon and making sure they're not actually charging you more than Amazon would charge you. That's, I just feel like people don't look at the fees. They're just trying to send stuff. I'm like, please look at the fees. It adds up so fast. So I outsourced that and it was good. I mean, that one, yeah, you have to, but it took a long time to find it. I have a good place now who's very familiar with Amazon, which is great. And with Walmart, because I have started selling on Walmart fulfillment services and they've been,
Sure.
which is almost identical. FBA, just they don't have such a great built out system.
Yeah.
So I outsourced that. I outsourced social media when things were getting like really big, and I think that's the one I would regret. It was overpriced for what it was, to be honest, and I was doing it myself, and I was I was editing and I was like correcting and they would send me what they're going to post. I'm like, I just should do it myself. Like I was anyway. And I think that's one thing I would take back. And I did, but that's one thing that I thought was not worth it at all, to be honest. I think maybe
Yeah.
for some people, but I was also so part of my community. So maybe it's a little bit different. Maybe for maybe someone who's not in it as much, but I wanted to respond to my customers on social media because they became my friends. So that's one thing I would not put that at the top of the list. I would of something to spend when you're outsourcing. Bookkeeper, that was the best thing. Number one, anything to do with finances. Oh my God, anything to do. And I think in the beginning it's fine when you have programs and you can put it in, but finding a proper bookkeeper, and I'm like, wait a second, they're taking how much for Amazon advertising? Because you don't think you get your payment and you're like, I guess that sounds right. But being able to see the breakdown has been huge.
So how large is your internal team? Let's say actual employees or freelancers who are working for you in a, say more than 20 hours a week. Like how large is your team?
So for that, at one point it was bigger. Now it's smaller because again, you figure out what's important or not. So right now I have contractors slash freelancers, 4 or 5, and not working a ton, but it's enough. Like I think when you first start out and then you're growing, you're like, I'm gonna get someone to do this because you see those things on like Instagram and whatever, and they're like, work a couple hours, look, just have outsource everything. And then I'm just like, no, that's my business. Like, no. But you do get caught up and you're like, oh, I can afford this now, so let me do it. And then you're like, never mind, because you don't realize with Amazon, at least for me, um, I have my really, really great months, and then I have months where I'm just like, why are you here? You have nothing to do for me. So I did have someone who was great, and she worked for me for 5 years, and they just came to the point where Amazon is up and down, and with the all the time the news is like recession's coming, and they've been saying that since 2020. And then after the iOS changes in 2021 with Facebook, it just came to the point where we had to part ways last year, and that was like very sad for me. But she was amazing, and that was someone who's like a huge help for me. But yeah, so like 4 to 5, and then obviously freelancing for graphic design for images now. And I think, one thing is it's good to finally let go and outsource and get that help, but then you also need to know when you don't need it. And I think you realize that quickly when the cash is going fast. You're like, wait a second, I can do that myself. So yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Switching gears a little bit, what would be your advice for, so we have a lot of listeners, they're very Amazon focused, but obviously, which Amazon can be really great, but I think at this point where, when we talk about building a brand, you have to have things besides Amazon. So
Yes.
one of the things I noticed that you had is expanding out to some working with some small brick and mortar.
Yes.
Can you share a little bit of your experience with that with listeners and what that looks like?
Yes.
What that journeys look like for you?
Yes, I've been lucky for the smaller stores. They've reached out to me because they saw me on Amazon, to be honest, or their customers had asked for it. The only thing I would strongly, I don't want to say discourage, I would strongly encourage people to research before they do it, is signing up with a distributor. I signed up with a distributor in 2020, and I thought, like, I made it. That's it. It
Right.
almost ruined my business. And I think that's when my ego came into check. I was like, oh my God, I lost so much money. It didn't sell like I thought it was. And just because you sell really well online does not mean you're going to sell well on the shelves. And it was a huge, huge humbling moment for me. And I think once you put your ego aside, because when people ask you like, oh, you're on Amazon, but are you in Whole Foods yet? Are you in Central Market yet? And before I used to be like, no, but I want to. And now I've seen like competitors that were in those stores and they're not there anymore. You know why? Because you don't make money. So I think that was probably the biggest lesson that I've learned is like, don't be so focused on what looks like being successful. Because I've talked to people who are in those stores and my sales are more than theirs. And I'm like, so who cares? Like, I think once you just don't think about what looks like you're successful and you just do what is working for you, that was the smartest thing. Just working on the bottom line and focusing on that. I think also having backups like health sites, if like for food, for me, like being on other websites has been helpful for me. Being Target Plus is a new one, and that's been like a slow start, but pretty cool. And then Walmart, that was one that surprised me. I was like, should I do it? Should I not do it? But they really are coming in. I mean, they don't have a sophisticated system in the back end like Amazon does, but
Yeah.
they're getting there. And it's not like I'm making even like 5% maybe of what I make on Amazon, or maybe 10. So like maybe I make like 10% what I make on Amazon, but that's still 10%. And so I think that's really cool. I think once they finally build out their ad center and they build out everything a little bit better, which hopefully they will soon, it's very, very basic right now. That's something that I think a lot of sellers, it's very similar to FBA. Just send it in. You already have, if you have the stock, and but just know that it's not going to sell at the same speed, obviously, as Amazon.
So on Walmart, um, the so you said you're selling maybe 10% of what you're selling on Amazon. Are you? I assume that you're referring to revenue.
Yes. I was just trying to figure out in my head right now. I was actually doing the numbers. Yeah, maybe like 8 to 10%. But again, it started at like 1%. And so then it went
How
to
is
5.
profitability there though? Because Amazon's fees are really high. We're not on Walmart anymore because we sell it at way too premium of a price point to be able to make it work in our category. For Walmart, it just doesn't work. But I'm curious, are the margins better there in terms of the fee structure and whatnot?
It's almost identical.
Okay.
Because I did a comparison. It was just the only issue I had with, and I figured it out, was I don't love their payout structure in the sense that with Amazon they do the advertising fees for the actual time frame that you're using them, and in
Hmm.
Walmart they're lagged. So maybe like one pay period they don't have your ad fees, and then maybe the next one they'll have it for what was the last month, and you're like, wait, like, and so it just
Okay.
makes bookkeeping a nightmare. My bookkeeper's awesome, but it makes it just kind of like, but I would say it's almost identical.
Okay. Thank you.
What about
Yeah.
advertising cost per clicks? Are they close to the same, or are they a lot less on Walmart?
So they're close to the same. At one point I was just running, when you just kind of run it and you're trying to see and then you forget. So then you go back and so at one point not good. But I would say pretty similar, a little bit cheaper. I would say a little bit cheaper, and not as much competition, so the ROAS is easier to, like, it's easier to achieve a higher ROAS with Walmart. But the thing is, again, you can't make sophisticated ads as targeted, especially on Walmart. It's very, very basic. So it's really just like you make something and I was just like, can I add this? And it's not like that at all. So I think my 11-year-old could run an ad on Walmart. Like, that's how easy it is. I don't know how successful it'll be, but that's how easy it is. Yeah, like Walmart, like Amazon, I have a contractor who does my ads, and that was another thing that like probably helped me the most, is like getting people to outsource for advertising. Because some of those Amazon stuff, like the ads are tough. Like, you have to really know your stuff, and I would recommend, if you have the funds for it, that's something I would definitely outsource on Amazon if you really don't know how to do it. And I didn't know how to do it because I grew completely organically. I didn't have any ads for, I think, like a year and a half. I didn't even know. I did like one ad and it was called New Year's. I still have it, and I put my budget was $1. And then it made like 1,000. I was like, okay. But that was it. And then when I hired someone, he's like, do you know you have no ads? I was like, oh, okay. Do I need them? He's like, yes. And that first month my sales jumped double, which was so cool to see.
Yeah.
Those were the days, guys. Those were the days. Those were the
Well,
days.
kind of speaking of those, newer platforms, you mentioned Target Plus, and I
Yes.
think you said that's fairly new for you.
Mhm.
What has been the most surprising part of getting on a Target Plus so far?
I think it's that you have to find. I'm able to get on it because I have a fulfillment center. So that's what's helpful. You do have to ship it within 2 days. It doesn't have to get there within 2 days. I think, again, it's finding the right partner to help you to do it, because as just like an individual, you can't. It's like kind of a system. What is it called? It's kind of like I don't want to say hierarchy, but there are certain sellers that already have the approval, and those are the sellers that are now reaching out and selling their own stuff, and then reaching out to companies like me, like, oh, I can sell it for you. I'm going to
Okay,
take
so
this commission.
you didn't get an invite. You went through somebody else as a third party
Who
that's
then
selling.
got my brand approved.
Yeah, yeah,
So
we went the same route.
yeah, and it was just easier. And so I think, like, at first I was like, what? Don't they see I make sales? It was not like, get offended, like almost like, don't you know who I am? So they didn't offer anything to me. Very humbling. I was like, come on, Target Plus. But someone said, I can get you on. I was like, do it. And it's just interesting to see what those customers also buy. And then it's a different price point. It's higher, actually, because I now have to pay for the shipping. I don't have those beautiful, like, Amazon shipping fees. I have to do it myself. And so that's been a learning curve for sure.